It turns cold during October in northern Minnesota. People pull their boats from the lake in anticipation of the coming snow. It was that time of year that 2 youths from the Leech Lake Band of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe would disappear 5 years apart under strange circumstances. In this episode, we will cover the disappearance of Nevaeh Kingbird and Jourdain from the small town of Bemidji, Minnesota. What happened to Nevaeh Kingbird and Jourdain? Nevaeh Kingbird's mom, Teddy, was at work at a casino when she called Nevaeh. Nevaeh was slurring her speech, and Teddy was concerned about her teenage daughter, so she left her shift at the casino where she worked and frantically drove back to her home in Bemidji, Minnesota. Teddy had reason to be worried. Nevaeh had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. 2 of Nevaeh's friends had committed suicide earlier in the year, sending Nevaeh into depression. Teenagers can be rebellious, as Teddy would find out when she got back to her house. Nevaeh's friends barricaded the door and wouldn't let Teddy in, so Teddy went back to her car. She was desperate to check on her daughter, so she called the police. When the police arrived, they forced their way into the house, but Nevaeh had slipped out the back door, and Teddy never did see her daughter. Later that evening, around midnight, Nevaeh was at another house party with her cousin and a guy friend. They were in a bedroom when the boy's stepdad knocked angrily on the door and asked them to leave. Instead of leaving by the door, Nevaeh leapt out the window and hit her head on the ground. Nevaeh would lay motionless on the ground for several minutes. Eventually, she got up with her head still spinning. Then she bolted off in the cold, snowy Minnesota night. Her cousin followed close behind. Eventually, Nevaeh and her cousin got separated, leaving Nevaeh alone and frightened in the dark. Nevaeh would have been freezing as the temperature was below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. A young woman that fit Nevaeh's description was reported around 3:30 a.m. on that same evening in the residential area of Washington Avenue Southwest in Pine Grove. The police suspected that the girl was Nevaeh, but have not been able to confirm it was her. That night, Nevaeh disappeared. There was another couple who'd heard a knock on their door in the middle of the night. Confused and half awake, they answered, but whoever knocked got scared and ran off. The couple would later find a window in their garage had been broken. It is suspected that Nevaeh had tried to take shelter there from the bitter Minnesota weather. Nevaeh's mom, Teddy, and the rest of the family came down with COVID. This was the middle of the pandemic, and a frustrated Teddy couldn't search for Nevaeh. Simultaneously, she was feeling terrible and had difficulty doing anything. Nevaeh's social media would go completely silent. She had a nearly constant social media presence. Nevaeh had run away before, but she always kept in touch. It was later found when Nevaeh jumped out the window at the party in the second house at Southview Terrace Park. She dropped her phone between the wall and the bed. The phone was Nevaeh's source of contact with the world, and without it, she would be unable to reach out for help when she desperately needed it. During a search of a swampy area in Bemidji, they found a pair of pants and a sweater that belonged to a family member that Nevaeh may have been wearing. Ground crews searched standing armtip to armtip and walked through the brush and swamps, but not a shred of evidence was found. Bemidji is a small town northwest of Minneapolis. As of 2020, the population of Bemidji was only 15,000. But sadly, Nevaeh wasn't the first Native American youth to disappear in Bemidji. On October 31st, 2016, 17-year-old Jeremy Jourdain went missing from Bemidji under similar circumstances to Nevaeh. Jeremy was doing what teenagers do. He was partying with his friends for Halloween and looking at his cell phone. Jeremy lived 16 miles south of Bemidji in Cass Lake, where he lived with his grandpa. Jeremy had a friend drive him to the party where he met with his sister, who was already there. Jeremy was having a good time and most likely drinking. He suddenly got up, said he didn't want to be there anymore, and ran from the residence at around midnight. Although family members followed frantically behind him, they were unable to find him. Concerned, his family met at his grandpa's house in Cass Lake, but Jeremy never came home. The next day at 9 a.m., they called the police to enter a missing persons report. The police used sniffer dogs who raised their nose and sniffed the air. They picked up Jeremy's scent, but they stopped and sat down at the intersection of 6th and Wood Avenue, which is what a dog does when it loses its scent. It is theorized he got in a car and was spirited away to somewhere else. The police and volunteers have done many searches, walking shoulder to shoulder through fields and forest, only to come back frustrated and empty-handed. As recently as the spring of 2024, new searches were planned and executed, but so far no sign of Jeremy has been found. After 8 years, the police still believe that something untoward happened to Jeremy. So what happened to these two teenage residents of Bemidji, Minnesota? This is a question we can't answer, but we can shed some light on. Both Nevaeh and Jeremy were alone and vulnerable at a time of the year in Minnesota when the temperatures were below freezing. The warm interior of a car would be enticing to someone in this situation. Since the sniffer dogs caught Jeremy's scent and then lost it, it indicates he most likely got into a car. Did the same happen to Nevaeh? Was this a crime of opportunity or was it planned? In Jeremy's case, it had been rumored but unconfirmed that he received a call before suddenly leaving the party. But why would he do so? He was a homebody who dreamed of playing basketball in college, so he was looking forward to his future. It seems unlikely he left voluntarily. In Nevaeh's case, she dropped her phone between the bed and the wall before she leapt out the window, so unless she made contact with someone before that, she was most likely on her own. She had run away before, but always kept in touch and came back. She had a family she loved, and they loved her, so again, this seems unlikely. These disappearances appear to be crimes of opportunity. If so, who took them? We can also shed some light on this situation. Minnesota has about 3 human trafficking cases per 100,000 people, which isn't the highest in the United States, but it still happens. There was a sting operation in June of 2021, which was a few months before Nevaeh went missing. 6 men were arrested in the operation, including Michael Lee Eichstad, 56, and Quint Kyle Iron Necklace, 24. Both men were from Bemidji. 3 years before Jeremy Jourdain went missing, there was a trafficking sting in St. Paul where 47 men were arrested and they saved 28 victims from being trafficked, including one that was a minor. Jumping ahead to 2023, there was another sting operation in St. Paul where 11 men were arrested and 4 victims were saved. So there has been considerable trafficking activity in the area of Bemidji around the time that Nevaeh and Jeremy went missing. The Enbridge Line 3 is an oil pipeline that goes from the Canadian oil sands to Lake Superior's western tip near the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. The Enbridge company put together a fund in advance to combat trafficking before the pipeline was even built. The Leech Lake Band of the Ojibwe tribe was opposed to the location of the new pipeline across its land. Nevaeh was a member of the Ojibwe tribe and spoke the Ojibwe language fluently, so there seems to be a possible connection to human trafficking and her disappearance. We should note that most pipeliners are hardworking people trying to make a living, but when you have that many men away from home for months on end, trouble is bound to break out. When 6 men in Minnesota were arrested for human trafficking, 2 were pipeliners. During the building of the Enbridge pipeline, women reported being harassed by pipeline workers, causing the Enbridge company to send its employees to an anti-harassment training. Unfortunately, there is no way to know if Nevaeh and Jeremy were trafficked. We won't know what happened until they are found, or until someone comes forward with a tip that breaks these cases wide open. Nevaeh Kingbird is a member of the Leech Lake Band of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe. She can speak fluent Ojibwe as well as English. She is 5'4" and weighs 120 pounds. She was 15 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen in a black zip-up sweatshirt or a red sweatshirt with a logo of a bull wearing a feather headdress, jeans, black slide-type Nike sandals with the Nike logo in red lettering, and unspecified outerwear. She has a scar near her left eyebrow and a scar on the back of her left thigh, and her ears are pierced. At the time of her disappearance, Nevaeh had a blonde streak on one side of her hair. Jeremy Leon Jourdain has been missing since September 31st, 2016. He's a Native American male who is 17 years old at the time he disappeared. Jeremy was born February 9th, 1999. He is 6'4" and weighs 185 pounds. He was last seen wearing a blue and gray hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and a black and white elephant print Nike Air Jordan shoes. He has black hair and brown eyes. He, like Nevaeh, is also part of the Leech Lake Band of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe. In spite of constant searches, there are no new clues in either of these cases. If you know anything about the disappearance of Nevaeh Kingbird or Jeremy Jourdain, you should contact the Bemidji Police Department at 218-333-9111. Or you can get on Minnesota Crime Stoppers and leave a tip. Help us get more cases out. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. See you soon.